Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for sticking around rather than having your lunch. I'm sure there'll be plenty left afterwards. My name is David Brammer. This is pretty much my background. I've done a lot of work in retail. I worked with TK Maxx, with Boots, also with Kingfisher, and more recently as head of TA for Ocado. Ocado actually not technically a retailer. Actually 90% of that business is about AI, robotics and automation. It's about technology. It's actually not really a retailer at all. But typically, I've joined companies to talk about their global transformations, mergers and acquisitions, and I normally kind of fix problems over a period of time and then kind of move on and do my thing. But I actually started out some 20-odd years ago now on the agency side of things. I used to work for Computer People, and I had the Serco account in the Ministry of Defence for a number of years, so used to do a lot of stuff with IT contracting. But that's me in a nutshell. If I do run into you later, the answer is 6'7". Just save you a little bit of time. You don't have to ask. 6'7". And yes, I am Northern, but yes, I do live in London, and it's nice to be back. So I'm going to talk to you today. When I was asked to talk, and I was asked about what I would like to talk about, I wanted to try and make it really relevant, but also something that's really tangible and something that you could kind of take away, or anyone could really take away and action quite simply. And I have a bit of a passion for this one, rehiring ex-employees. It's something that I've done consistently over a number of different companies over a number of years. First of all at Boots back in probably about 2010, 2011, something like that. And it's a really, really easy way to really generate, I suppose, some great talent and bring them back into your business and get people who are going to automatically kind of get up to speed really quick. So today's session is about fixing your boomerang. Not my slide necessarily, but we'll go with it. So has anybody ever had that kind of conversation when you're talking to a hiring manager and they say, you remember Roger? We need a Roger. Do you remember Roger? He was really good. No one ever actually says, what's Roger doing now? Would Roger come back? Because we like Roger, and I think Roger liked us, and actually he did a really, really good job. And that was the premise on which I kind of started doing some, you wouldn't really call it alumni hiring, because they're not in an alumni community necessarily, because sometimes these rebound or boomerang hires happen within a specific time zone, right? So like 3 months, 6 months. But I want to start with some statistics. 14% is the average global attrition rate, according to Statista.com. 11.8% is the average European turnover or attrition rate. £3,000 is your average cost per hire here in the UK, and that can take anywhere typically between 40 and 62 days. And that is really balanced between non-tech and tech, which are the two primary markets that we tend to talk about in these types of scenarios. Now, there's a lot of truth in that, and having been a TA head of or TA director in a bunch of different companies, largely actually the average cost per hire, if you can get it to around 3,000 or lower, you're ahead of the market. You're doing pretty well. If you're a tech business like Ocado, actually in the Ocado technology business, we were really happy if we got it south of 5,000. So just for context, that's the blended kind of rate. Now, this is an interesting statistic that I found on the Tinterweb the other day when I was kind of browsing. And actually, when you start to just break down and move away from the cost of hiring, and you actually look at the opportunity cost and the inferred or implied damage that is caused by having someone exit the business and what that means in terms of them ramping down, you not only having to hire someone to come in, but their downtime, the opportunity cost, training costs, everything else, it can be estimated that anywhere up to 75% of your starting salary could be the impact of having someone leave your business. So I wanted to run a scenario. So if you have an employee base of 20,000 people, you have a turnover that's below average at 10%. So you've got 2,000 FTE leaving your business each year at an average cost of £3,000, which is low comparatively if you are in a tech market specifically. That means that the annual cost of your attrition hire is already 6 million. If you want to hire people back into your business, there's a very specific way of going about that. Not everybody that leaves your business is what you might call a good leaver, right? Or a bad leaver. And it depends, because in different companies, some people will call that a good leaver and some people will call it a bad leaver. In my experience, typically what a good leaver is assumed to be is someone who you wanted to leave. Thanks very much. Great. You contributed. You did a great job, but it's not for you, and it probably wasn't for us either. You go with, best wishes. If you're a bad leaver, you're someone that we didn't want to lose. Therefore, we want to hire you back if we can. So if we go back to our scenario just for a second, if in that enterprise where you've got your 20,000 and you've got your 2,000 turnover and your average cost of 3,000, if that's costing you 6 million and you can rehire just 10% of those leavers, which is not a big number, you can have cost avoidance or achieve cost avoidance of 600,000. Now, here's an important thing. Tangible, 600,000. That's a number. It's a figure. It's commercial. Your accountants will love it for you. Love you for it. Your CFO will love that. But actually, there are bigger benefits to that too, because it's not just about finance. And I'll come on to that in a while. So, as you saw before, I'm not going to allude to which company it was that I worked for, but you can probably put two and two together. I worked for a company that had over 2,000 clinics in the UK. We were making about 6,000 hires a year, 20% attrition rate, which at the time, that was actually going well. Typically, it was closer to 25%. 8,000 ex-employees on a database. Now, bear in mind this was pre-GDPR, right? So bear with me for a second. Some of the practices back then, you wouldn't be able to emulate or redo today because you just wouldn't be able to do that with people's data. But we had a database of approximately 500 plus locum clinicians, and we then targeted from all of that data approximately 800 leavers. Now what I then did was I took 4 of my recruiters from that team and dedicated them over a period of time to just working on the CRM platform, which at the time there at that company was Salesforce. So we had an absolute database of people that we could call through that were not only warm because they'd worked for us before and they knew us, but we knew exactly what they did, where they were based, what their salary was when they left us. Now that was a really important point because this particular company would happily hire someone on their graduate scheme. That person would roll off the graduate scheme onto a salary of £38,000 a year. They would then get offered by a competitor down the street at £45,000 a year, and this employer would say, we can't match that. Go in peace, and we'll see you again down the road, which they did. Approximately 12 months later, when they were then paying that same person £48,000 to get them back out of that particular scenario. Turnover and attrition was the biggest problem that this specific company had. When we made essentially our efforts to kind of dedicate these recruiters to these targeted database of people, we actually managed to rehire over 90 or approximately 12% within a 12-month period. Now, when we broke that down into cost avoidance, yeah, it's £250,000, right? But moreover and more important than that, we understood when those people came back into the business why they left in the first place. And that allowed some fringe benefits. So we could understand more about our employer brand, our offer, our leadership, what our comp and bends actually looked like, and whether it was competitive or not in that particular region or in that industry. But 250K of cost avoidance then allowed me to invest in different things. So at the time, social talent was a relatively new thing. I managed to buy licenses for 30 recruiters off the back of doing a piece of work that cost nothing and rehired us a great deal of talent. Here are the non-financial benefits as I kind of break them down. So, reduced time to full productivity is a really big thing. If you take into account that you're a new employer at a company, you don't know anything about the systems, you don't know about how stuff works, how to get stuff done, right? When it comes to raising an invoice even, or raising a PO for something, it's difficult. But if you've worked in a company before, you're going to get up to productivity much quicker. You've got established working relationships. You know the hierarchy, you know the people, you know how it looks, how it works, how it feels. You may have come in a different capacity, right? So when you left, doesn't mean you're going to come back in the same role. Doesn't also mean you're going to come back and get a promotion or a pay rise because of it. But you are going to have most likely established working relationships. Again, like I say, you're going to know those systems and have the process knowledge. And actually, from a hiring manager point of view, there's very, very limited onboarding that you've got to do. That historical context is really, really important. Where to start? Now, I can obviously only share with you the context of what I've done previously with different employers. This is not necessarily a kind of a warts and all. Neither is it a golden ticket to successfully rehiring guaranteed 10% of your people back into your business. But the timeline kind of looks like this. There are a few what we might call moments that matter, if I was to use Ocado terminology. The end date. So the optimal rehiring actually happens before someone has technically left the business. You might want to kind of call it counter-offer culture, right? Or counter-offer in general. But actually, there are then some very, very specific intervals within which, if you reach out to people, you are very, very likely or statistically more likely to get them re-engaged. And this one here is the most important for me. So when I'm asking my recruiters to reach out to the bad leavers or the people that we would happily bring back into the business, what I'm doing is I'm asking them to do that at the point where I know that their probation is up. By the time you've done 3 months in a company, you know if it's meeting your expectations or if it's not. If it was a good move or if actually, I don't know, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. And you know by that point. You've then got the midterm. So if you've had a conversation with someone at 3 months, they're like, I don't know. Schedule another conversation, maybe at 3, 4, 5 months, 6 months. And then, actually, that's when you shift from Boomerang hiring and then it becomes more about your alumni community. This becomes entirely a different matter. Your alumni community relies on you having either, you don't have to, but ideally you would have a CRM platform like an Avature, a Beamery, a Salesforce, all of which I've worked with, all of which are very, very suitable for this. You would then also have a recruitment marketing strategy or a content strategy, social strategy to keep these people engaged and send out regular content to them. But at this point, it's no longer a Boomerang hire. At this point, yes, it is a rehire, but it's probably on a basis of a different role, most likely. There are also some really important things to note in terms of accountability, because this doesn't just sit purely within the recruiter landscape, right? So at the point of resignation, what a lot of companies don't do particularly consistently, just give me a show of hands, how many companies that you guys work for have a consistent exit process? 1, 3. Okay, 4. That's not great, right? Exit is really important. Few reasons. 1, it has to be impartial. If it's not, and you're doing your exit interview with your hiring manager, and your hiring manager was the reason that you were leaving in the first place, that's a bit of a problem, right? But it's also your first opportunity to understand why. People often join a company, they leave a leader. That's an old adage, right? We've probably all heard that one. But you've got to have that impartiality. So it's typically not the line manager, but you might want to get the HRBP involved in that first conversation. At the second stage, again, it's still probably the line manager and the HRBP when you're having that proper exit conversation. The interview's done. You understand why they're leaving. You know where they're going. You've accepted their resignation. But this is the conversation on the way out that says, do you know what? Are you absolutely sure? If you're not, then that's fine. Let's have a conversation. We can commit to something in the future. The 12-week point absolutely sits with TA. That sits with your recruiter, and it's something that you manage between the recruiter and the line. And then beyond that, when we move into the alumni kind of territory and into the CRM space, that's where you've got your head of recruitment marketing and their team who are creating this content for people, sending it out into the alumni community, generating referrals, talking to them about different alumni kind of events and or things that are going on. Boots used to do a really good job. They had a benevolent fund, so they would have something called Benny Day, where anybody could kind of come along who was an ex-Boots employee, and they could kind of come back and they'd get, you could buy a bag of Boots products, Darren Walker in the background from Amazon smiling because we both worked there together. And you get a bag and it was like 10 quid and it might have 5 Marc Jacobs perfumes in it. But this is all about community. This is all about reaching people and connecting with them on a different level. But the accountability moves along and changes. Some of the prerequisites, the filter. This is really important. This is that good and bad lever bit that I talked about before. Super important. Don't assume that because someone used to work for your company that they were successful. Don't also assume that they were a good kind of cultural fit and that they got on with everybody and everybody liked them. Some people just didn't like Stephen or Gary or Daisy. It's the truth. Not everybody will always talk about that though. So when you're talking to the HRBP, are they a regretted leaver or not? Process. This is about capturing those stages that we just talked about when it comes to the exit process, the exit interview, when you're going to catch up with people. There are platforms out there that you can do that for, or with rather, but it's really important to identify your process and do the contracting as well between the recruiter, the HRBP, and the line manager. Systems are important. Your ATS probably cannot deal with this. It is more of a CRM type of situation. I'm a big fan of Boomerang. I've also used Avature. I've used Salesforce. There are a bunch of great CRMs out there. Not all of them have to be super expensive, but they are pretty relevant when it comes to your alumni community and when you want to start communicating with people on a regular basis and you want to send out segmented messaging to different people about different things. It's about the chain of accountability also. So again, that's more about the contracting stuff that we kind of already talked about a bit in the process bit. It's the contracting of who does what and when. You've then got to talk about budgets. If you do get into this territory here where you're going to get a CRM and you're going to embark properly into the alumni community piece, it isn't going to be free. There aren't many free CRM platforms out there. There might be a few that will give you a trial for free, but after that it's going to cost. And it's also going to cost you in time and in process when it comes to your alumni community and your marketing. But the content is the key. Again, this is at the latter stage when we're talking about the alumni communities, the content is the key. It's not all about, we've got this job, do you want to come back? Some of it is about, we're having this event, we're doing this, it's the benevolent fund, it's this, it's that. It's a referral generating piece, right? So actually what we didn't talk about on the slide when I was talking about the 90 plus people that we managed to rehire in that particular retailer was that we actually also generated well in excess of 100 referrals. Because that is something that people are really happy to do. Not everybody leaves a company on bad terms and wants to come back, right? Or doesn't want to come back. Some people who leave a company leave on really good terms, but it's just time for them to move on. And they'd be really happy to generate referrals for you. Final things, or final thoughts really from me. Flexibility is required on this stuff. You have to keep an open mind. Because Gary left the company as an associate on 45 grand a year, doesn't mean that Gary is going to be happy to come back as an associate on exactly 45 grand a year. There was a reason that Gary left in the first place. You have to understand it and both sides have to be flexible or it will just break down. Expectations may have shifted. So whatever was broken for that individual in the first place, whether it was their line manager, whether it was a lack of development, a lack of furtherment or progression, actually, whatever those expectations have shifted to, you've got to do the contracting about that before they come back. Or the same things are just going to exist and the bounce rate is going to exist again. So of the people that we rehired, of the 90 that we rehired, actually about 30% of those people still left within 12 months because a lot of the problems didn't get fixed. So you have to do the expectation setting bit. You have to also think about the impact or the optics for the colleagues of the people who are coming back into the business. Again, not to use the Gary scenario too heavily, not everyone liked Gary. Some people thought Gary was a bit of a dick, right? Chances are, if they thought that before, Gary's probably still the same dick. You've got to bear in mind, that's a reality of the situation. Apologies for my potty mouth, but it's true. You've got to resolve the previous issues. If there was something that was bothering the employer or the individual about their engagement previously, whether it was salary, whether it was whatever, you've got to get it out of the way. And alumni, this is the last piece that I want to say. Alumni communities take commitment. It's like people who talk about social recruiting and companies who spend an absolute fortune on developing a fantastic EVP and then they post something to LinkedIn every third month. And it's always the same shit. Having social, but not posting anything on it is antisocial. Same thing with alumni communities. They don't want to hear from you every day, but they do want to hear from you regularly. And it can't just be the same thing about here's an opportunity, here's another opportunity. Do you know anyone for this opportunity? It has to have a beneficial or mutual kind of thing. So that's the end of my slides. So I'll open it up for any questions.
Can we give David a round of applause first?
Thanks.